an Ask Me Anything format that's focused on your job search, on careers and advancement, and anything else that's career related. Today, our guest is Yang Zhu. Yang is the Senior Vice President of Global Finance and the Treasurer at the Kraft Heinz Company. Yang, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Joe. I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a Friday. I don't think we can complain. So where in the world are you located? Where are you joining us from?
At this particular moment, I'm in Amsterdam.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a curveball I didn't expect. How's life over there these days?
Yeah, the pandemic has been throwing lots of things up in the air. So I think like every country, the European Union is trying to work it through, and the recent riot didn't help. But I think it's just a phase. I have a conviction that's going to get better.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I certainly have that hope, and I share that with you. So Treasury community, this is your opportunity to ask Yang any questions regarding your job search, your careers and advancement, what she's done throughout her career. I do have questions that I will be asking, but our preference is to give you access to a treasurer that you wouldn't get at a conference, at a panel discussion, or anything like that. So please, Scotty is on mute. He's monitoring the conversation. Jump in with any questions or comments, and we'll make sure that they are heard. So Yang, with that, I'm going to put you on the hot seat here. How did you come into Treasury, and why did you choose Treasury as your career?
Well, it was almost 20 years ago. I stumbled into Treasury. So I was a graduate student. I was looking for a job, and among multiple jobs, finance related. Among multiple jobs, there was one that caught my attention. It says the European and Asian Treasury Center based in Belgium for a company, a global multinational company. And so I had to Google, at the time actually Yahoo it, like what does Treasury do? And I end up understanding actually it's a lot of in-house banking, managing cash and FX and whatnot. I think it was very relevant to my field of study, that was international finance and banking. And so stumbled into it, loved it, because it gave me a lot of breadth to see companies' financial health in a very different way, to see which company generate more cash, which company is buying what in what currency from which other places. So it's kind of fascinating. I remember at the time it was like 34 companies under our watch and lots of cash changing hands. I was fascinated ever since.
That's great, and I can tell you what really resonates with me is just figuring out what the heck Treasury was when you were first approached with the opportunity. I think I can speak for both me and Scotty in saying, in initial talks with Simon, you Google. Now it is Google. It's no longer Yahoo. Maybe you DuckDuckGo, but you Google Treasury, and most of the stuff you see is about the government. And then once you realize what it is and you learn more about it, obviously this was 20 years ago for you, so you've fallen in love with it, and we certainly have too. So knowing that you have that you've been in the space, or that you've worked your way up from that initial position all the way into where you're at right now, what have been some of your career highlights so far?
So I mentioned I started with Treasury. Then a couple of years later, I was moved from Belgium to the headquarters in the United States. After a couple of years, just doing a certain Treasury aspect of integration, I came along with the M&A deal. I actually actively moved away from Treasury, and let me explain why. I thought, Treasury is a lot of every day there's a routine, and through Treasury you can see the financial health of many companies. But at the time I was young, I was eager, I was very curious. I moved away from Treasury just because I heard so much about the bigger finance career, this bigger ocean that I could try to swim or sink. Then I came out of Treasury. I did all kinds of roles in M&A, in strategy, FP&A, and until it was 5-6 years ago, I got another phone call from the same company that they say, well, you know what, we want someone who understands Treasury, understand the broader sense of finance, and come back to Treasury as the senior director at that time, and we wanted to have you. I'm like, wow, but Treasury is it's very technical. I was more the generalist to do. I come back to the technical path. And I thought about that. I said yes. I was so glad I said yes. Now looking back, just because there was one aspect of Treasury I didn't know when I debuted my career, that was more not only the operation aspect, which is awfully critical, crucial for any company, but there's an aspect that Treasury that comes along with a strategic view, which is of course, you have operations, you have major transactions, that capital market and whatnot. But also, as you move up, there's also strategic aspect how you manage companies' capital structure in a very differentiated way. So it's not by coincidence. I mean, many of us treasurers sit down with the C-suite, with the board, and talk about what we should, where we generate the cash and how we should apply the cash to the places that truly is meaningful to take the company, to take any company to the next level. So those things become fascinating. And of course, through Treasury, I get to see, it's a window. I always tell my people, it's a window to see the external world, because you can have a lot of access to your banking partners, lots of very bright minds. And you are like a mini, not only internal focusing finance person, but also external, because you need to know where the market is going at all times. So it's kind of exciting. It's exciting, it's a strategic, it's a nice combination with operations, and has an external view, has outside view. I just think many people that they're wiser than myself, that they choose to be treasury professional all day long. They are wiser than me. I zigzag, like choose to come back.
Yeah. So that's a very unique path that you've taken in your career, right? You spent the time in M&A and FP&A. How did that impact you as a treasury professional? Or how did that, I would have to imagine that it helped you see the business or the businesses that you work in and that you support or that you work with in such a different way.
I believe in two paths, and two paths are all good. There's no better or worse. One path that, as any professional, you can be singular in climbing up a career ladder. And so I can start with the analyst all the way become a treasurer, and it happens in many places. And I also believe in another path where you become more generalist. Then you end up focusing on one area, choosing to become your anchor. So I'm more of the generalist, of the latter, the generalist, and I've seen many things. At a point in time, I actually was out of finance. I was in sales and marketing. So I just have this more curiosity, I guess. But I believe that certain things that the former, where they are more in depth, they are technically very strong, and have a lot of respect of my peers like this. Just being 20-30 years in the domain, know everything inside out, technically very strong. And I have someone in my team like this. I have tremendous respect for him. And there's another population like me or some of my other team members. We zigzag, we just have the broader perspective. But for me personally, what it helps me is every collection of the experience, no matter it's operations, it's sales and marketing, or M&A, or strategy, or FP&A, every collection, ultimately, that once you can connect the dots, that gives you a bigger perspective. Like, so for example, if I'm sitting on the table with a business general manager, I can speak their language, but I can also anchor in my treasury language, and that provide different perspective. I can relate a bit more. It is necessarily the best path or the quickest path. I mean, it's up for judgment, and just nobody knows. I think all paths leads to Rome.
Yeah. No, that's great. And typically what I've found, or how the analogy I've used has been, you have your career ladder, but then you also have your career jungle gym, where sometimes you're shifting to the left or the right. Maybe it's a lateral move, maybe it's a step back to get experience that you need to move forward, whatever it may be. The whole idea is just understanding the strategic standpoint to it, acting with intent, and really just diving into it with both feet. And it sounds like for you, it's paid off. Like you said, you can meet people where they're at, which helps them view you more as a strategic partner, which makes you more effective as a treasurer.
That's absolutely true. And sometimes I take a visual view of how I view treasury, right? I always tell my team it's a reverse pyramid. And the pyramid, the first layer I call is control and compliances, because we are dealing with massive, derivatives or cash or asset on the investment at all times. There's a lot of responsibility. So Treasury, first and foremost, has to be the golden standard in terms of control compliances. So this is really a bread and butter. Second layer for me is to have systems, to have processes that is as streamlined as possible. Just because we can spend 80% of our time digging for the information, knowing where the cash is, or we can spend 20% of the time leveraging the processes and the systems and automations so that the insight, you can spend much more time to get to put into insights. The third layer for me, it is major transactions, because a certain step in the treasury that you've got to manage your banking group, you've got to refinance your debt. Certain places, the other transactions, derivatives or share buybacks and whatnot. Those are all important and cannot go wrong, right? The company places a lot of trust in us as professionals to make sure that those things be done at the most streamlined and also cost-effective way. The last piece is only, like I call it the reverse pyramid, is you cannot go, the last piece what I call the strategic advisory. You cannot get to there unless you get the 3 layers right. Yeah. And then strategic advisory is to really to make sure that treasurers, and I believe in this because liquidity is really the bloodline for any company. COVID taught us a lot of things, but for those who are like as old as I am, 2008, 2009, the same thing. I mean, that at times the things are good, but also be wary about that things can, through cycles, things can be tougher. So it's at all times keep this view and be a strategic voice to the company, to the broader company. You can say C-suite and board, but also in the operating level. Why at all times we need to be worried about the integrity of our cash, derivatives, and the liquidity. Really, really important.
That's the first time I've heard the pyramid analogy, or the reverse pyramid analogy, and I absolutely love it. Scotty, what do you have?
Yeah, so just really briefly, I'd like to make an announcement to everybody watching live on YouTube. We're not able to take your comments or questions on YouTube at this time, so we're taking those on LinkedIn, or feel free to email them to me, Scotty@treasurytalent.com. That being said, we did get a question that came through LinkedIn. So Yang, I just want to pose this to you. It's not an easy one, but I'm sure you'll have a great answer, and that is, given these unprecedented times, what do you consider to be the most challenging aspect of Treasury today?
I think there are two things. One is, how do we capture through volatility, still safeguard the company? Because when things go wrong, it can go awfully wrong. And we don't want to test that. We don't want to go there. So the number one, and later I will come back to what are the ways that I can describe a little bit more. And the second one is to have the good talents at all times. And I will also elaborate a little bit, but let me come back to the first one. So in my company, for example, I've been extremely cautious about managing not only liquidity, but liability, not only the debt side, but also off-balance sheet liabilities. Just because we know everyone goes through cycles, but when you go through the cycles, you would know that when liquidity can dry up from one day to the other, and a lot of things can, when things go bad, there's a lot of things can pop up, right? For example, your working capital cycle can really be bad, and then your working capital financing can disappear, and when business could go south, and therefore you could triple over your covenants or really close to your covenants, etc., etc. So things can really go bad. So always be very prudent. Always be very prudent to think what can go wrong and what type of buffer you need. because then we're not going, we don't need to scrum by the 11th hour. And when you do scrum by the 11th hour, and some companies unfortunately did experience that during COVID, but also in 2008, 2009, and you can put really a company in trouble. And it's our duty. Again, I think it's a treasury professional is in our shoulders. We have to be wary. We have to be really prudent at all times. You know, pension contribution and VIVA and whatnot, everything under our shoulder is on us to be really safeguarding the company at all times. This is number one. And number two, obviously, I talk about talents, because in my view, it's treasury, it's any function, but for me, like I take it personally, it's treasury, because if we don't have the right talents, you cannot be successful. It cannot. And the talent needs to be a very good group of people, where you need people who are really disciplined, process-oriented. You need people who really understand the debt capital market, really can pull the transaction very smoothly together. You need people who are really good in packaging stories together, so you can talk to your bond investors, you can talk to rating agencies, talk to your bankings. You need such a combination of everything. And it's very rare that you find people with a lot of technical skill set and yet had, you know, the process top mindset, or the storytelling mindset, or the system mindset. So you always need to have an anchor plus something. And this is a very unique team where you do need a lot of functional knowledge, which is technical, but also something on top. So that's why, I mean, you guys have a tough job, right? Because you're recruiters, you always hear from us as the hiring managers, I want the impossible. But it's really important, because only by having the right team, it's like a chessboard, as a treasurer chessboard, only have the right team and putting in the places that they shine the most, it can piece everything together. Otherwise, if you rely on me, my reverse pyramid will collapse. I cannot become a strategic advisor if I don't have my team at all times in its place to help me to handle all right pyramid all together with me.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And that does absolutely lead into one of the questions I had for you, is what are the key things that you do look for in your direct reports when hiring? And it sounds like it truly is that mix of technical knowledge or technical expertise and those soft skills. And that's something that I know we talk about, but is there anything you'd want to elaborate on that? Or
the last thing is more personality traits. It's, for me, it's a drive. And I read some books in my past and say what define people successful or not is how much drive that you personally, like from inner drive that you have. And I reflect, and some wise people also said you can teach many people about the skills, but you cannot teach this drive, you know, personal attribute. And so when you see a talent that is very eager, very curious, very eager, always want to take the extra mile. Sometimes, you know, mistakes, we all are, we're making mistakes. But when you see those kind of talents, give them a chance for them to shine, put them into bigger projects, stretch them, provide them a platform so that they can learn more. And sometimes we need, we're people managers, we need to be a bit more patient, because you know they're not there in day one, but it's like a parent, right? You need to let the children to go explore themselves and guiding them to the right path so they can truly grow. It's no different from a professional landscape. So for me, if I find this person, if he's missing one or the other, as long as this person has a drive, we can train. We can train this person. And it just takes longer, it's more patience and more on-the-job training, but we can get there. But this, so again, the technical skill set, the leadership skill set, and I call them, you know, softer skill set with anchor, and the drive. I think those three things are indispensable.
it's fantastic. And I can already tell how your team's structured, because in order to take the chance and be able to bring that person along, you have to have those strong people around you to help you coach them and develop them and mentor them the way that you need them to be effective for your team.
Yeah, we are people managers. We carry a lot of responsibility for the well-being, financially, psychologically, belonging-wise for our people. So it's absolutely on us. Every good manager would say that it's a sense of duty. sense of duty that we should all share.
You're touching on a passionate area for me. We could probably take this conversation for a very long time down that path. But Scotty, you got to jump in here. What's going on?
Yeah, no, it's interesting just to kind of flip over to the other side and giving advice to others who, perhaps are in a similar position to yourself, but aren't happy. So this question actually comes from an individual who is a professional networker like we are, actually runs a professional network in Treasury. And I'll just read the question. He says, I know a number of people at the treasurer and HE level with large company experience who are either unemployed or unhappy in their role and want to make a change. Aside from referring them to Treasury Talent, thank you for the plug, what would be your advice for them?
I think Treasury is a small world. You guys know this even more than I do. Of course, now I have Treasury and finance role, but I noticed that Treasury is a small community. That's why I feel passionate to spend the time to talk to my fellow Treasury professionals. Treasury is a small world. Goodwill carries a long way. So you'll be surprised if you talk to your bankers, you treat them with respect, fairly, but always put the company benefits on top. And then when you treat your fellow peers fairly and with respect, goodwill carries a long way. It is a small world, as we said. Treasury always need a skill set that is not easily acquired. So I think for people who are in this domain, already have an edge. Say, I'm already a treasury professional, already have a certificate, and already come with how many years of experience under my belt. And then on top of that, I do not necessarily network with a lot of people, timing and personality dependent. But I do know if one day I pick up the phone, call the people that I really have a lot of respect on, I'm sure they will pick up the phone. And maybe this is one, I'm not necessarily, I never tried, so I don't necessarily would give you the best of the advice. But I think, again, the goodwill plus the experience I already have will go a long way.
Yeah, and we talked about that quite a bit, right? There's a lot in your career that you cannot control. The current pandemic, and that impacted a lot of people's employment situations. It's not their fault. Doesn't mean they're it doesn't mean they're bad performers or they were bad employees or anything. But that's why we always talk about, not only developing your network, but maintaining that network and those relationships, because you never know when you might have to be tapped on the shoulder or when you might have to tap somebody on the shoulder. So, I think when we talk about strategic relationships and non-transactional relationships, it's not just tapping the network when you need it. And I'm not saying that you do that whatsoever, but in order to do that, you have to spend the time to build those relationships. It may only be a handful of people that you're going to call when you need something, but you need to develop and maintain those relationships with those people so that you have those resources, because you never know when you might need them. And perfect example with the question: if you find yourself in a situation where you're unhappy, or or you're not currently working, you need those resources and those relationships now more than ever.
And I also would have to say, like, the market has been jumpy. The COVID has put a lot of treasury professional front and center in any company, right? So this is a place where treasury professionals start shining more than ever. So capitalize that. If for whatever reason we're still unhappy with the current role that we have, then that's a different conversation. But capitalize this. This might lead into something that is bigger. You feel more fulfilled, that you can make an even more impact than usual. So leverage it.
Absolutely. This is for as much as the market's jumping around, both from a volatility standpoint and from a career standpoint. I mean, there are openings out there, and it is very competitive because there are a lot of people looking for work. But you're in control of it, right? You control your effort levels, and ultimately that'll impact where you land and what type of position you land and that type of stuff. And just the one thing that you can't control with any of this is timing. And we talk about that quite a bit too. The opportunity has to be there, but it's also on you to make sure that you're open and available when that job comes available for you. So
it's awfully important to pick the company that have the right culture fit.
Definitely, definitely. I'd say that's one of the most popular criteria that we get when we ask these questions is what's important to you, how you're evaluating opportunities when you're looking for your next role. And it's the people that you work with that, the most common things we see are, hey, I want to be proud of the company that I work for. I want to like the people that I work with. I want to like the work that I do, and I want to be paid fairly for it.
Yes.
So cool. Scotty, do we have anything else from the group, or should I move on?
It looks like you can move on for the time being, Joe. I definitely will implore everyone. We're going to have to let Yang go here in 5 minutes. So here's an opportunity. Got a lot of great comments, which is fantastic, but please, questions are welcome. So we've got 4 more minutes now to get them over to us.
So I want to bounce back to the hiring piece real quick, Yang. What are your thoughts around the CTP or CFA? Do they make a difference for you when you're looking at resumes or when you're considering hiring someone? What are your thoughts around that? And I'm not trying to get you in trouble with the AFP or anyone else. This is just purely a question, and everyone has an individual preference.
So if I'm recruiting today, then I have tons of resumes in front of me. Everything being equal, the certificate will jump out. But that's a big promise, is like everything being equal. So first, what I'm looking for, if I look, is that this person progress in the career area, which can be within Treasury or like me, like jumping in and out of Treasury, but ultimately you accumulate the right skill set within Treasury. So first, can this person do the job? Number one, right? When you have nothing to judge, you just look at resume. That's the first thing you look. And the second, is there progression in this person's resume? So if it's a progression, that give me an indication, may not necessarily be right, but give me an indication that this person is driven or want to have the next step, right? So the drive early on we talked about is there. And then if I have the both, then I will look, well, what else? And if it's what else, then the certificate comes in, because that gives me also indication this person really likes Treasury.
Yeah.
And took the time above and beyond the day job to do something else, right? To really learn. So that will be the plus after the first and second.
No, that makes sense. And when Scotty and I field those questions and we field them often, it's more of a, hey, this is something that you'd rather have and not need than need and not have. And it is a dedication to your craft to show that you want to continue to excel and learn and grow and develop in the field. So I think that's a really well thought out answer, and thank you for sharing. Scotty, do we have anything else? I want to make sure that I'm not taking the last 2 minutes up here. Okay. All right. Then my closing question for you. Starting your career, if you could go back, what is the best advice that you would give yourself or that you would give to a young Treasury professional who's trying to advance in their career?
When I started my career, I never knew where I wanted to go. I never had a clear goal of I want to become the CEO, CFO, whatever. And but looking back, what was helpful to me personally is I always go to the extra mile versus what I was asked to do. So if I'm in a role, I'm managing, let's say, FX, I always want to see like why. I always ask the second and third why, and I'm always more interested in the broader picture rather than here's what I'm asked to do, here's a step A to B. So that has helped me. It helped me to accumulate more knowledge and learning along the way. And it helps me because sometimes I said, when you connect the dots and you just never know what information or what opportunity can lead to the next one. I never planned for it purposefully, but those kind of curiosity and learning really helped. So I will always tell the younger me, if I were to restart, 20 years ago, and to say, be curious, be open-minded, always do your best, always do your best. Even if that doesn't lead you to anywhere, but eventually it will.
Yeah.
But that is not what you're working for, to lead you to the next level. Be curious and always do your best, always will have good outcome.
Yeah. That's great advice. And I think that's great to close on. Scotty, did you have a closing comment or a question?
Well, we did get a question, and I think you just answered it, Yang, inadvertently around just, what advice you would give a Treasury professional to grow in their careers. I will ask a yes/no question since we've really got a hard stop and we need to wrap it up. Is Treasurer the final spot for you? You mentioned the C-suite. Do we see a CFO position in your future? Yes or no, if you're willing?
Earlier, yes, you said yes, a yes or no. Yes, I would like to continue to progress, but again, what I take from here is always focus on what I do and do my best. And then if it leads, if it doesn't lead, it's okay. Yeah. But thanks for this question and thanks for having me.
No, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. And Treasury community, thank you very much for joining us, tuning in and asking your questions. This is a regular Friday occurrence. Ask a Treasurer on Fridays, Ask a Treasury Recruiter on Mondays, and we have our practitioner conversations on Wednesdays. With that, Yang, we'll take you off the hot seat. Thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend. And everyone else, we'll see you later.